Hello folks, this is Steve A.B. for you. Nothing in this episode is a promotion, nothing is a recommendation. And remember, I'm just an idiot running my mouth and I have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. But I'm old. And I'll remind you, as I have so many times, that in 1966, among other places, I hitchhiked through the Arab world in the Middle East. Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, then to Lebanon, then to Syria, Jordan, occupied Jordanian Jerusalem, into Israel, and then to Italy. 1966. So, since then, I had kind of a familiarity interest, because I'd been there. So what's going on now, the last day of November 2024? Well, I know I'm not going to get it an exact quote, but Mark Twain once said, history doesn't repeat, but it seems to rhyme. News about Aleppo. Aleppo is the northernmost major city in northwestern Syria. I've never been there. Its nearest neighbor is Turkey. Syria war live. Rebels take control of Aleppo, igniting new phase of war. Now, there's been a civil war going on in Syria. Some people would tell you of some number. It's been forever. Back and forth, phases. NBC News, Syria Civil War, live updates. Live updates! Insurgents storm Aleppo. Rebels seize control over most of Syria's largest city in Aleppo and the airport. There's the Reuters. Now pay attention. Israel's involved in this, but who else? Turkey as a neighbor. Oh, and Russia. Reuters, 3 hours ago. Syrian rebels sweep into Aleppo. Russia conducts strikes, that's airstrikes, in support of Assad. Who's Assad? He's the president. The president. Aleppo assault is biggest challenge to Assad in the ongoing civil war in years. Russia conducts strikes in support of the Syrian army. Russia and Turkish ministers discuss, see Turkey? Why would the Turks be interested? You mean there are certain rebels in northern Syria somewhere along Turkish border they could periodically go over? Rebels say they control Aleppo airport. Airstrikes reported in Aleppo after army vows to counter attack. Okay, so there's active fighting, but there's more. Now, we go to this website. Turkey-backed jihadists. What? Turkey-backed? I thought they were neighbors. Aren't the Turks and the Syrians friendly? I'm being sarcastic. Have you ever heard of Kurdistan? Kurdistan region in Iraq. Kurdistan borders Turkey, Iran, and Syria. They're not really an independent people or country, but they've been claiming that they need to be and they attack all three of those targets. How long have they been doing that? Well, I was in Israel in the 1960s and they were doing it then. I'm hinting at certain things, just keep repeating. After capturing the central and northwestern parts of Aleppo, Syria's largest northern city, armed jihadists, we know what that is, right? 9/11? Do you understand what jihad is? 9/11. What kind of thinkers or non-thinkers are they? What are their motives? What drives them? Who do they claim gives them the power to do it? Armed jihadist insurgents, which means they would have led by, I never heard of this organization, so it's a new one to me, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. First time I'm looking, is a Sunni Islamist political and armed organization involved in the Syrian civil war. Today, the HTS can be thought of as a relatively localized Syrian terrorist organization which retains a Salafi jihadist. See, I'm not going to get into that. That goes into the earliest struggles of Islam after Muhammad. Oh, you mean back in like the 8th century or something like that? Regional media cited as saying the HTS has begun. Now here's the key thing. They've taken the airport and part or all of Aleppo. And other news reports say that the Syrian army got the hell out of town, trying to surround it maybe and isolate it. But, according to this article, regional media has cited Middle East Eye. They have a YouTube channel. They're citing Middle East Eye. They have a YouTube channel. Regional media has cited HTS sources to say that these insurgents, they begun marching toward Hama. Now remember, I'm old. These names ring a bell. Successfully capturing 6 towns and villages. So that means the Syrian army's been pushed back and is ineffective. Including Morik, which lies along, now pay attention, an important highway connecting central Syria to the north. Yeah, all the way down to Damascus. The Syrian government has denied that many of the towns or villages. Importantly, now this has to do with air reinforcement. If you've been to Syria, you know that it's mountainous and hill and it's like the Piedmont in North Carolina. If you don't have roads, it's real hard to get over the hills and valleys. I've been there, not in the north, but I know what it's like. Importantly, the jihadists now claim control of Aleppo City International Airport. So if the military wants to resupply their people in that northern region, they can't use the airport to do it. They got to do it by road. And no, they're not next to the seaport, Latakia. That's too far. And besides that, the jihadists can cut them off easily because of the terrain. What does that mean? That means a column of trucks can be ambushed easily. You can't get off the road. You just pick your points. How do I know that? Because I remember the ride from Damascus down to Jerusalem, and I remember that in northern Jordan, how the road climbed up these hills, rocky hills, and to the left and to the right it was like this. And the Jordanian army would have no trouble, even with a small force, preventing an invader, like in the Black September War, because it's just a two-lane road, and you can't turn the vehicles off the road. You're stuck on the road. You blast the front one, and the rest of them are stuck, and maybe they could turn around. You blast one at the back, and they're sitting ducks. I'm reliving some of my experiences. Russian and Syria airstrikes have continued to pound this. Now, listen to what it says. Russian and Syrian airstrikes have continued to bomb the central occupied parts of Aleppo. They're bombing the city. Oh, I thought the Israelis were the only ones that did stuff like that. You know, Beirut. Oh! Is everybody going to get all upset and say, what are the Russians doing bombing civilians? Is there going to be a big propaganda thing? The Russian participation is nothing new. They've been doing that for like 20 years in concert with the president of Syria. Russian and Syrian airstrikes have continued to pound. I'm just adding color. The central occupied parts of Aleppo. They're bombing the city. Pay attention to that. These mark the first major aerial bombardments of the city since the anti-Assad insurgents driven out in 2016. What did Mark Twain say? History doesn't repeat, but it seems to rhyme. Oh, but we're going to go back even further than 2016. Watch. This part up here to the left, and here's the border right there, that's Turkey. So Turkey is there's Iskandarian, that's an important seaport in Turkey. You notice I know how to say it. It sounds like a certain manufacturer of camshafts for race cars in the 1970s, Iskandarian. Look it up. Aleppo, that's the city that's currently being bombed, taken over by these Islamist insurgents. Latakia is a seaport city, so you can see that the road goes sneaky. Oh, but there's a central plain here. But to get up from Latakia, meh. Now, notice this highway here. See that highway right there? That's the Central Northern Highway. And you see the word Hama? Did they mention that? And then Oms. And then it continues down to Damascus. That's the north-central route in the western portion of Syria, which is the most economic and geopolitically important part of Syria, because everything over here is desert. They need to grow some trees. Now, there's supposedly, the Syrian army has acknowledged a temporary retreat from Aleppo in order to regroup. Also, as Moscow is demanding that President Assad quickly restore order. The AFP has bluntly said the Turkish intelligence gave the green light for the attack on Aleppo. Turkey is a member of NATO. The jihadists and their Turkey-backed allies and supplies took orders from a joint operations command. So people are trying to gather war information as to who's actually involved and what's going on. Okay? Hours after thousands of Syrian Islamic militants entered Aleppo facing little resistance from government troops who basically were just on vacation and fanned out inside the city in vehicles with improvised armor and pickups, deploying to landmarks like the old Citadel. If you saw the picture, you saw the Citadel standing up above the rest of the city. Did you notice it? I did. I would notice it because I've seen it in so many places. That was the ancient way of doing things. The way you control something is you get up on a hill and you build a fort there. The enemy has to attack uphill. That's a big disadvantage. You can shoot downhill on them. So from Aleppo, they're already to this place here. Can you see the citadel there? Can you see the big butte there, right in the background middle, with a single mosque tower on it? That's the citadel. Why would they be marching south? Eventually to get to Damascus. So the next big place is Hama, and that rang the bell for me. Who's the president of Syria? Well, there he is, Bashar al-Assad. He's almost 60 years old. He's the 19th and current president of Syria since 2000. President of Syria since 2000. Took over from his father. Now it calls him, he's a Syrian politician and dictator. Yes, his title is president, but dictator who has been the 19th and current president of Syria since 2000. He's also the commander-in-chief of the Syrian Armed Forces, and he's the Secretary General of the Central Command of the Arab Socialist Ba'ath Party. Now, just to remind you, a long time ago, Syria and Egypt tried to start something. United Arab Republic, which today is composed only of, oh, wait a minute. Can you see the picture there? You see this picture right here? You see how it has Egypt and Syria? See those two? They tried to form like an EU or a United States or a UK, the United Arab Republic, Egypt, United Arab Republic, Syria. Did it last? No. Wait a minute, what's the official name of Egypt? My mind is straying. Official name of Egypt from 1958 to 1971. From 1958 to 1971, the official name of Egypt was the United Arab Republic, as it formed a union with Syria during this period, even though Syria later seceded from the union in 1961. Egypt continued to use the UAR name until 1971. There's a lot of crap stuffed in my mind. This is the father of the current president and dictator, Hafez al-Assad. Was a Syrian politician and armed forces officer who served as the 18th, just preceding one, president of Syria from 1971. Oh, that date sound familiar? Yeah, he broke away from Egypt to go on their own path for certain reasons until his death in 2000. Now, he was actually an Air Force pilot. He'd been in the military 100% of his life once he was out of high school. Now, what did I say that a famous American writer said? History doesn't repeat, but it seems to rhyme. He's always been involved in politics, starting from his Air Force career in 1950. Apparently he was a pretty good flyer for an Arab pilot. I say that because they've always had to come up against the Israelis. And yes, the Israelis occasionally get shot down, but the ratio is unbelievable. Look at this. The headline here in this big long article about the father of the current president and dictator, who was also president and eventually dictator of Syria. Look at this, 58 to 63, run up to the 63 coup. And this is about his involvement in politics and his competition with other people. And they're different. Oh, and he was involved after the Arab defeat in the Six-Day War. After the Arab defeat in the Six-Day War in 1967, June, in which Israel captured the Golan Heights from Syria, provoked a furious quarrel among Syria's leadership. Da, 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 da. And then there was a split as to who was really running what. Now you're wondering where I'm going. And then we get to 1970, 3 years before the 1973 war. They were defeated in the 1967 war, lost the strategic Golan Heights where they could put artillery and just bombard northern Galilee, which they still want to do. So in 1970, this guy, the father of the current president and dictator, began planning to seize power shortly after this failed Syrian military interventions in the Black September, a power struggle between the Philistine Liberation Organization and the Hashemite monarchy. King Hussein, amateur radio, call sign JY1. The Black September revolt led by, you know who, a guy born in Egypt. Black September, also known as the Jordanian Civil War, was an armed conflict between Jordan, led by the Hashemite kingdom, King Hussein, the grandfather of the current king of Jordan, all direct lineal descendants from Muhammad, and the Philistine Liberation Organization, chaired by that Egyptian-born Yasser Arafat. The main phase of fighting took place between 16 and 27 September 1970, in which the Jordanian Air Force, we mentioned the Air Force before. One of the things that King Hussein apparently thought of and probably learned from the British, did you know that the current king of Jordan, the son of Hussein. Did you know that he went to school in the United States up at Deerfield Academy for a while in Massachusetts? No, he didn't just get his education in the British Military Academy. He got some of it from our best New England old schools. Oh, I'm off track. So when the Philistines tried nationwide, so to speak, within Jordan to overthrow the king, they hadn't planned ahead. But the king Hussein had, and one of the critical things, now remember, bombardment, air forces play boom, 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 important roles. It turns out, I learned back then, after the war, this thing that was put down, that King Hussein and his people, inner people, had been very careful. See, Hussein is a Bedouin. The current king is a Bedouin, not a Philistine, a Bedouin. And at that time, the Jordanian Air Force, all of the pilots were Bedouins, not a single Philistine, excluded. Oh, that sounds like discrimination. Why would they do that? To guarantee loyalty to the king in the presence of an unruly, sizable alien population, the Philistines. There was something called the Philistine Liberation Army Tank Corps that during this uprising tried to come from Syria. Somehow it was built up in Syria under Assad and tried to go into northern Jordan on that road I mentioned, that I went down going from Damascus to Jerusalem. And the light Jordanian Air Forces were able to ambush it on the road I described. And once you destroy something in the beginning, especially with tanks, and one at the end, armored vehicle, and they can't turn around because the road is so narrow, and they're under machine gun fire, and all of that, then the Jordanian Air Force, piloted only by Bedouins who have no hesitation to bomb them, the Syrian Air Force was scrambled to come to the aid of the Philistine invaders. Now I'm repeating something I learned back then. And then the Israelis, seeing that on their radars, turned off the thing that they'd been using to scramble the Syrian radars to let them actually see for real what was in the sky instead of what the fake signals were that the Israelis had been feeding into them, blinding them. And they discovered that Israel had launched almost 200 fighter aircraft that were circling in the north, waiting for the Syrian Air Force to actually go into Jordan, because then that would be their pretext to destroy the entire Syrian Air Force in defense of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan as a courtesy. And when they saw how many Israelis were waiting for them, because they had had some incidents with them earlier in the year, they went back and landed. And the Jordanians just finished off the Philistines, to the point that Philistine terrorists were going to the Jordan River, yelling across to the Israelis, waving their guns and visibly throwing them into the Jordan River, and then diving in and swimming across and surrendering to become prisoners of the Israelis, so the Jordanian Army wouldn't massacre them. Go look it up. Anyway, back to this. So we go a little further. Now remember, this is the old man. And we come to what's going on. Islamist uprising. Hafez's pragmatic policies indirectly led to the establishment of a new class. and he accepted it while it furnished his further aims toward Israel. Economic liberalization, Ba'ath's party, but the Islamists were against the Ba'ath's party. They wanted it to be an Islamic state, not a sectarian state, not like we have here. And then we have this. Ta-da! What did that famous American writer say? History doesn't repeat, but it seems to rhyme. The Islamist uprising began in the late 1970s. Are they talking about the 1970s, or are they talking about now? With attacks on prominent members of the Ba'ath's party. As the conflict worsened, a debate in the party between hardliners, represented by the brother of Assad, and Ba'ath liberals, commies, it's a crisis. The party leadership, with the exception of Hafez and his protégés, were criticized severely by Parliament. So what are we going to do? So we go to the next paragraph, and it's right next to his face. Believing they had the upper hand in the conflict beginning in 1980, the Islamists began a series of campaigns against government installations. Where? In Aleppo. Ta-da! The attacks became urban guerrilla warfare. Ta-da! Like what's been going on as a lead up to current day takeover by the Islamist insurgents of Aleppo and the airport now, but we're talking about back then. The government began to lose control in the city. Oh, it's a repeat. Inspired by events, similar disturbances spread to Hama. What did it say back here? They've taken over Aleppo and they're on the road to Hama. There's Aleppo up here. There's Aleppo up here, and they're on the road to Hama, which means they're on the road to Damascus. Now listen, pay attention. Next paragraph with a picture. The final showdown after they bombed out Aleppo, Assad's people, the Air Force. He was a pilot. That was his primary constituent in the military. And the final showdown, the Hama massacre, took place in February 1982, when the government crushed the uprising. Helicopter gunships, bulldozers, artillery bombardment razed the city. That means destroyed it to the ground. Oh, everybody says only the Israelis do that to Arabs. Killing thousands of people. The Ba'ath's government withstood the uprising not because of popular support, but because of the opposition was disorganized and had little urban support. Throughout the uprising, the Sunni, that's the other guys, middle class continued to support the Ba'ath parties because of the dislike of political Islam, fundamentalism. After the uprising, the government resumed its version of militaristic Leninism. Militaristic, not socialistic. Military. What did Lenin do? Go talk about the early history of collectivization under Stalin of Ukraine and all those other republics, how they did it. After the uprising, the government resumed its version of militaristic Leninism, reverting to the liberalization introduced by when Hafez came to So they even have a thing called the Hama massacre. That's what's next, folks. That's what's next. They bombed it back then, they're going to bomb it now. That's right. My prediction is that history repeats more than rhymes. My prediction is Hamas going to have another one. Betcha. They're already halfway there. It's logical. They've got to stop. The central government, Assad Jr., has to stop it. The Hama massacre occurred in February 1982 when the Syrian Arab Army and defense companies, paramilitary force, under the orders of Bashar al-Assad, besieged the town for 27 days in order to quell an uprising by the Muslim Brotherhood, the ones that killed Saddam, and 9/11, and all that stuff, against the Ba'ath government. Remember, the Ba'ath tried to make a UAR. The campaign began in 1976 by Sunni Muslim groups, including the Muslim Brotherhood, was brutally crushed by in an anti-Sunni massacre. That Wikipedia is using that word, carried out by the Syrian and the militias. You mean they're militias? Like the ones that are not a political party in Lebanon, but they're also a militia, and the Syrian army is separate from the Syrian army there in Lebanon. I'm sorry, the Lebanese army. Oh, you mean all these countries seem to have these things? Did our country ever have something like that? Sure we did. Militias? Bunker Hill? They came all the way from Western Massachusetts. Oh! Battle of Alamance! It was a fight between the colonial soldiers and militias from over the hills. Oh, guys. Oh, yeah. But we're more modern, and do we allow militias now? We only allow National Guard. I'm just trying to... Prior to the start of operations, Hafez al-Assad issued orders to seal off Hama from the rest of the world, effectively imposing a media blackout, total shutdown of communications, electricity, and food supplies to the city for months. Go back and look in the news. Was there a big propaganda outrage over that? Like the stuff you see now? Oh, there was no internet? Yes, there was. At the beginning of it. Initial Western report said 1,000 killed, but such subsequent estimates vary, with the lower estimates being at least 10,000 deaths. This is one city, while others put the number at 20,000 and others put it at 40,000. The massacre remains the single deadliest act of violence perpetrated by an Arab state on its own population in modern Middle Eastern history. Is history going to repeat, or is it just going to rhyme with events that are unfolding right now in Syria? Basically a replay of this. I'm not taking sides in it. Steve A.B. Foriel, just an idiot running his mouth. I have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about. I must be just full of you know what. Happy after Thanksgiving. Steve A.B. Foriel saying, see you in 73.